Welcome to Jim, who's just come in the door. Okay, good. We are actually live now, by the way, so that's okay. But so we might carry on. It's good that you're here, Jim. Thanks very much. So, welcome. I think most people on the call know me, but for those who are viewing it on catch up, I'm called David Eyre. I was been treasurer of the RSE since August of last year, and one of the things that I inherited was chair of the Buildings Working Group. And I gave a brief update at the annual statutory meeting, but a lot has happened since, and we felt it was important to share that with the wider fellowship, just to let you see where the thinking's going, and then to hear any immediate reactions or questions that people have. So the plan is, I'll talk for a couple of slides, and then I'm going to pass over to our architect colleagues, Scott and Liz, who will take us through all the good work that they're doing, and then we'll throw it open to questions afterwards. And, you know, if you put your hand up on Zoom, that would be great. We're actually recording this so that people who weren't able to make this date will be able to view it. So if you don't want your photo to be preserved for posterity, you know what to do with your camera, but it's nice to see you and your smiling faces. Good. Okay, so the first slide. Are we going to share screen? Yeah. Here we go. Great. Okay, let's go on to the next slide after that. As some of you know, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm quite interested. Oh, sorry, we're just going to get the first slide. And while we're doing it, we should say welcome to anybody watching it on catch up. Thanks for joining, and hope you find it useful too. And here we go. Right, so the next slide after that. So yeah, so the team there that you're seeing, we've got Scott and Liz from the architects. Ian is the project manager and quantity surveyor expert from Thomson Gray, who's holding our hand through the process and keeping things going well. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So here are the numbers. Okay, so we own 2 buildings, 4,000 square meters. But we don't use them all. We rent out about a quarter to Lakeland, and we've got some long-term office clients on the top floor of the white building. If you add up all the space for the staff, desks, the president's office, chief executive office, general secretary, and the associated social spaces, that's just shy of 800 square meters, which leaves 2,150 square meters for meeting rooms, lecture theatres, function space, etc., etc. And I suppose the questions are, you know, do we need all that space? And there's pros and cons for all of that, you know, and in terms of whether we need it, do we want it? Could we actually use it for more income purposes? Could we use it to support the work of the society more, of making knowledge useful? You know, and you know, whatever space we need, how can we use it better and more effectively? And that's the point of this exercise. So the next page, Council has spent a reasonable amount of time discussing different options. This was a slide I showed at the annual statutory meeting, and we've looked at everything. You know, should we just leave as is and not do anything? Should we remodel the existing buildings? Should we sell one and use the proceeds to remodel the other? Should we actually sell both buildings and relocate either to some new build somewhere out of town, possibly, or should we actually go virtual? That would be another thing. So Council discussed all of these and homed in on, broadly speaking, 2 options. One is that we keep both buildings and remodel them for the future, or we sell one and keep the other and remodel. And that's onto the next slide. Rather than talking about option 2A and 2B and whatever, for the purposes of this evening, we're going to talk about 3 options. Option 1 being retain both buildings. Option 2 being that we keep the George Street building, which is the one we come into, and then we would sell the white building, or that we sell the white building at the corner and keep George Street. Next slide. Just a quick update of where we've been. So in June, Council agreed that these were the options that we wanted to explore, and that we would do it through a feasibility study using appropriate experts. And so when I became treasurer, first thing we had to do was appoint project managers with quantity surveying experience so that they can cost the different options and help us to think through the economics of that. And we appointed Thomson Gray, and Ian has showed what a good appointment that was. Then the next stage was to appoint architects, and there was a several stage process of that. Actually, it was in November that we decided who we wanted to appoint, but Scott was very clear that they weren't appointed until December, which is code for haven't they done a lot in a relatively short period of time. I mean, this is quite a tight programme. 3 months for doing all we're trying to do is the shortest it could possibly be, but we were very keen to make progress, certainly before, John steps down as president at the end of March. So that's why we're doing it in the minimum possible time. But all hands have been on deck, and I think, as you'll see, I mean, this is not the end of the process. We're only halfway through this 3-month project. But I think I hope what you'll see is will give you comfort that there's a lot of good thinking going on in here, and we're very grateful to our experts for helping us. So here are the buildings for those of you who like to see aerial shots, and we talk about the sort of the purpley one, we call that the George Street building, and funnily enough we call the other one the White building. And actually there's a whole number of different doorways and things, but broadly speaking we own 22 to 26 George Street with a wee bit round the corner into Hanover Street. And if you look at the history of that, because phase 1 has been very much looking at what do we have, why is it where it is, the form it is, are there conservation issues that we need to think about, and what are the issues with flow through and all this type of stuff. But in terms of the history, what's very interesting is, actually when the RSE was founded in 1783, there were no buildings on this site at all. And actually the first buildings were built a couple of years later in 1785. But then 1843 is when the sandstone building, George Street building, was actually built. And this insurance company, the Edinburgh Life Assurance Company, they demolished what was on this site and they built what's shown there as the blue building. But interestingly, they built it not just for themselves, but they built it for other occupants as well. And that's why there's several staircases in this building, because it was actually built originally to be sort of multi-occupant, which I think is quite interesting. Next thing then is the pink bit sticking out the back. So where the lecture theatre is now, those were actually clerks' offices that were built at the end of the 19th century with storage underneath. And then the next thing was the White building. And what happened was the Edinburgh Life Assurance Company wanted more space, so they actually demolished the building next door, built the White building in 1908, and then in 1909, the RSE moved into the George Street building. And we've occupied that since. And then it was, I think, round about the 94 is when we actually bought the White building. We bought the George Street building in 1989, and we bought the White building in 94. There were some renovations, and then we moved into that. So we're relatively new occupants of the White building. Though I'm sure most people in Edinburgh don't know that when they see the Royal Society written around the dome of it and things. But we've been in the George Street building for quite a long time. If you go on to the next slide, one of the interesting things is if you're interested in sort of old photos and things like that, seeing what the bottom left-hand corner, I love that photo of the library that would have been the reception area before when you came in here. But that's what it used to look like. We're not saying we want to put it back to that. It's not as bad as that, but it is quite nice to know where we've come from and what ideas people have thought about and things along the way. Next slide is just where are we in all of this? Well, we're doing stage 1 and stage 2 of the REBA project approach. And basically what we're trying to do by the end of this programme of work, the 3-month project, is decide, do we want 1 building or do we want to keep 2 buildings? And roughly what sort of thing might we do with them? And how would we then plan to go further in sort of developing more detailed designs and then eventually thinking of the phasing and how we would actually carry on all this sort of work. And so what we're going to be talking about today is mainly that pink bit, which is sort of looking through, looking at the buildings, where they've come from, how they operate, what the issues are with them, and what sort of things could you do to these buildings to make them more effective. And then what we'll be doing in parallel, so this briefing is work that was finished by about Christmas time. What's been going on since is then saying, well, what does that mean for how the RSE could use these buildings, and what are the different options and priorities that we should be thinking about, so that council will then get the stage 2 pack at the end of this month, with a view to having a couple of discussions in March to hopefully come to a decision on that. So my last slide is basically just to summarise what we're trying to do here. And above all else, what we're trying to do is to support the mission of the RSE. We're trying to get a space which supports what we do better, that helps to advance knowledge, share research, and influence our country positively. But if we can do that in a way which is more, climate friendly than we're currently doing it, in a way that promotes, that maximizes income from external sources and things like that, then that's all very important. And also make it a place that people want to come and to, and therefore will sort of support our events and our public engagement. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Scott, I think, is that right?
Yes.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Hello, I'm Scott Lindsay, partner at Simpson and Brown, and I'm joined tonight by Liz Simpson, an associate at Simpson and Brown. I'm going to start with a brief introduction on our practice and what we do, and then Liz is going to begin discussing the options. Simpson and Brown was founded in 1977 as an architectural practice, and over almost 50 years we've evolved to become a multidisciplinary practice of architects, master planners, heritage consultants and archaeologists. We work on sensitive sites all over the United Kingdom and abroad, including multiple sites in Edinburgh. The slide on the screen shows around 100 of our city centre projects which we've worked on, and we've put a few on the screen to touch on. Starting from the top left and working clockwise is our conversion of David Ryan's A-listed old college building at Stuart's Melville, which we converted to a performing arts centre for the client there a few years ago. We're currently appointed as conservation architects at Thomas Hamilton's A-listed.
That's okay, carry on.
Royal High School.
Well, in a while.
And that project will become the new National Centre for Music. And on the right is our new build Chapel of St Albert the Great, George Square, Edinburgh. At the bottom is Advocates Library, A-listed Playfair building, where we've just completed a similar feasibility study looking at the building for the client to improve their public outreach and their workspaces for advocates and staff there. So very similar brief to what we're looking at here. And finally, Johnny Walker Princess Street, which was alteration and retrofit of the former Binns department store to a visitor experience. Okay, Liz is going to discuss our progress to date. These are the three options that David touched on, option 1, 2 and 3, and Liz will start with retaining both buildings.
So retaining both buildings, certainly from an architect's perspective, is the easier option because we've got loads of space to do lots of things with, but it obviously goes without saying that the biggest impact of keeping both buildings is the cost of alterations and getting capital to do that work. The way we've gone about this project is to look at both the vision that David set out earlier of the sort of goals of an organisation and also the issues that there currently are in the building. And ideally what we want to do is fix the issues and deliver solutions and deliverables to the goals you set out. So I'm sure none of you will disagree with that there's a lot of issues with arrival into the building, that it's not fully accessible. It doesn't have a huge street presence. If you need step-free access, you're actually taken to the next door building to go into, albeit you own it. It's not a great arrival sequence. And then the chicane that many of you in this room have just had to do of getting from the George Street building into the White building, you actually go through what was a former strong room for when it was an insurance building. So really not a great sense of arrival, and we don't feel it really sells you as an organisation to anyone arriving into the building. So we've been looking at opportunities to improve this. So one of the main ones would be to bring in step-free entrance, possibly bringing in a sesame lift. That the one on the image at the top right is one where you can actually integrate that into steps. So the steps collapse down and then raise up, and then they go back to being steps. So a better arrival sequence. That could be within the current entrance, or it could be within the entrance that was to the right, number 24. And then once you're in the building, improving the arrival, making it an incredibly underutilised space. It's a wonderful space, reception, but I think we can all agree it's underutilised. The reception desk is quite remote. And then you have this awkward that we just saw today of having two receptions. Often when you've got an event going on, you have a temporary reception and then you have your main reception to the back. So we think that could be absolutely improved. Redesign the reception desk, possibly relocate it, and look at better furniture fit out. And we've been speaking about how we can have temporary exhibitions and just really make that space work hard rather than just being underutilised as it is at the moment. In terms of physical architectural changes, we're suggesting a new passageway to connect into the White building. That would take a little bit of space off the James Clark, so we had to call it James Clark Maxwell room, and then possibly add in a screen there and bring offices down. That doesn't make a quicker, shorter route into the White building, but it makes a much better route into the White building, much better for orientation. And it also benefits by bringing the former strong room back as a store. And as I was saying, making the reception much more flexible. You're going to want furniture storage so you can use it for events, and then tidy away the storage, tidy away the furniture when you want to flip it for something else. So moving to the back of the building where we have what we've been calling the rear salon, which is Wolfson Lecture Theatre that David was speaking about earlier. And then the upper gallery, which is the building that was mostly completed in the 1990s, although there was an earlier building that preceded that. So that was the yellow block on the 3D images we saw. We think that building, that gallery building, really is one of the biggest negative impacts on the site. I think you'll all be familiar with the Fellows Room and the outlook onto a glazed brick wall, the lack of light, despite it being south-facing windows. Really not great for the space. And the space itself, the upper gallery, to get to it, you have to walk through the Wolfson Lecture Theatre. So it's not a great ante-room for lectures. Makes it quite an awkward space to use. And then it's only connected to the rest of the building via that tiny corridor on the right-hand side. And then dropping down, similar issues, and even worse outlook from the McRobert Room. Almost no natural light into there. The lower gallery has a stepped floor, so only a very small part of it is accessible. The Swan Room, many of you have been in there, incredibly cold, not a very welcoming room, but has the potential to be quite a functional space. And often our projects come down to loos and fixing problems with loos. In this building, there's 4 sets of toilets in the basement, and that certainly could be improved, particularly for when you've got events on conferences, people only having a 15-minute break. Certainly opportunities for improvements there. So as I said, the Link building, as you'll know, blocks a lot of light and is really causing a bit of a negative impact on the building. So as I was saying, we tried to fix a problem and find an opportunity. So the opportunity we've suggested here is to take away that pitched roof and replace it, and also the wall that you look out onto, and replace it with a flat roof at a much higher level. So that creates a new roof terrace that you could access from the first floor, and also creates a new double height space, repurposed space below. So that's how it's sort of looking. So you can see the Fellows Room, we've shown that as a dining space, and these are just suggestions of how you could maybe repurpose the spaces.
So you're going very, very fast. Where's the retractable seating?
We'll get onto that shortly.
Okay, no. And just before you rush on again, you had the terrace,
Yes.
and which of course is always very attractive. But I found on some of the buildings in Edinburgh, it's a smokers area, and the Royal Scots Club has got a small terrace, but you can't use it because it's full of aging military people smoking. So.
You can make it a no smoking.
So this would be
No
above.
soldiers.
Would this be above the upper gallery?
Yes, it would be at roughly at the level of the Welcome Room West.
Right. So in other words, the upper gallery would remain there.
Yes, but by taking out, so we're creating a void, so there would be a galleried space and then a void in the centre, so that you would be able to see the two sets of windows from.
So I mean, maybe I'm jumping in here, but we've held events here. A number, I think 3 international conferences. I'm a fellow, so wear multiple hats. So what I was keen to do was I would like to see more seating in the big lecture theatre, because there's only 2 aisles.
Yeah.
And people like to sit on the aisle seat on EasyJet, so getting people into the middle is quite difficult. So I just checked before I came here. It's 144 seater, the Wolfson, but in reality, you would need a width there to get 144 people in, and you have an overflow area. So if you have an evening lecture and you want to come and you've booked late, you're then directed in a very cumbersome way to the upper gallery. But in reality, I think as a conference organizer, wearing that hat, I would like to have access to the upper gallery from the lecture theatre, which in fact exists to some extent.
I think we've got a solution for you here on that.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Yep.
So that is one of the things, that's one of the problems we spotted, that it was really annoying that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's fine, and lots of time for questions. So yes, there would be a direct link both from reception directly into the lecture theatre and from the lecture theatre into the upper gallery. The upper gallery would be a bit smaller because we've taken a hole out of the centre of it to bring light down to the lower gallery. But essentially it's creating better spaces. So you're losing the floor plate in some areas, but you're making a better floor plate at basement level.
But if you take out, are you taking out the connection to the lecture theatre?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, that's all.
You keep going.
And maybe just if it gives you comment, so these are not final proposals of what we're going to do. These are just some of the ideas that are being thought about that are helping to inform the decision of, do we keep both buildings and renovate both of them? Or do we decide to just sell one and move into the other with all the challenges that might bring and the disadvantages as well as potential some advantages?
The white building being the one next door?
Yes. So, but sorry, so that's, I think that's, so that this is, I think the plan is that we will take more questions later on from people online as well, because we're recording this for people to listen in. So we want to get through the slides if possible.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that there's a huge amount of detail here and you're going very quickly.
Sorry, I was just conscious we're limited for time.
But because it will be recorded, people can go back, but it's more just to give people a flavour of what's happening and to get initial sort of high level reactions and things. And it is helpful because, it's the passion of the fellows that make the organisation. So, we want to understand where people are thinking, if only it was different because these are important things.
No, it's a lot to digest that we're doing. You're in a building that you're very familiar with. So this just shows you a bit more in plan how that would work. On the left, so the lower gallery at basement level being the full floor plate, but at ground floor level, it would be a galleried space looking down into the basement. And then that would allow the windows from the Fellows Room and the McRobert Room to look out onto an enclosed space rather than onto that rather horrible wall at the moment. And that's where you can see how the new roof would be roughly at the Welcome Room levels.
There's a lot of roughly in that level thing. One of the striking things about these 2 buildings is that they are, there is nothing to be done about that. And as far as I can see in the proposition, is that just a given that all the floors are ski width?
Well, the 2 buildings are set up differently. We are showing proposals to address the level change as well. So what I say roughly, this roof could be at the level of the Welcome Room East, so you had direct access out, or it could be raised up to be level with Welcome Room West, so you had level access out there. So that there's options, but obviously we can't flatten out the floor plates entirely. So these are just a few precedent images of historic buildings where modern additions have been added, adding in glazed roof lights to abut a historic elevation that both brings light down and allows you to look up. You can imagine when you're in the rear court, you could look up and see through the roof lights the whole facade of the George Street building, which could be a really lovely thing to see, and create a kind of garden outside atmosphere of a space, which I think is quite a unique thing around here. And especially when George Street's maybe done with the cars gone, just lots of sort of outside space, quality of space there. So just moving on to the lecture theatre here, we've suggested taking off a small slice of the lecture theatre to allow direct access to the rear court, but there would also be a route through directly from the lecture theatre. We're conscious that you need to make your spaces work harder and make them more multifunctional. So we've suggested you can bring in, at the moment it's fixed rake seating. You'll notice you ramp up to then ramp down. That's all been built up in the 1990s. So we've suggested having part raked seating that's retractable and that can be pulled back, and part flat seating on the lower level that would be on the level of the stage.
Does that reduce the capacity?
We've got that designer of the raked seating at the moment is doing the number crunching for us to see what numbers you can get. It depends on what size of seat you'd be prepared to go down to, but we think we can keep the same number. It would just be a smaller, more efficiently laid out seating.
I mean, we're all getting fatter, aren't we, as the years go by? But I think we have some of these collapsible seats in the King's buildings, where I'm based, and I guess they're okay. It always looks a bit clumsy, because then you've got the servitors running around like idiots trying to, put the things back again. But
We have installed electronic retractable ones, where you press a button and they all.
as long as it works, yeah.
That's right. Sounds really
Get the
good.
fellas out of them first to go on.
You go.
So the benefit of having the retractable is where you can then pull all of that back into the most northerly bay, screen it off, and then you've got a function suite that you could use for a multitude of things, for smaller seminars, smaller presentations where you don't need the raked seating, private dining. We were suggesting the historic cupolas could be restored, so there'd be natural light in there. So by doing that, you're making that space multifunctional. Just dropping down to the basement, some issues here of limited space for servicing the kitchen, quite a narrow kitchen, really very limited division between back of house and front of house, which isn't great when you've got a lot of staff serving events. So we've suggested trying to delineate front of house and back of house through some small changes, by bringing in a new stair at the within the rear court. You can make the stair that currently comes down to the basement solely for back of house and service use. So that will just make events a lot more easy to operate. And then there's also potential to extend the kitchen, which might give you opportunity to do more in-house catering as well. So rising up to the Welcome Room East, limited changes we can do here. Most of it is about servicing. I've heard about the room overheating. It's got those amazing south-facing windows, but with that brings a lot of heat gain, and there's a lack of ventilation because of cross-ventilation, or lack of cross-ventilation. And then number 8 there, as you alluded to, the change in level between the two buildings. So there's no disabled access between the two spaces unless you go all the way down in the lift out into the other building and up. And I think we can all agree that's not a great way to attend an event. So we've proposed adding in at where number 5 is, a new small platform lift in the slot. It wouldn't be outside, it would be enclosed, and that would just address the 1.2 metre level change between the two. Where the number 3 is, we're looking at introducing new ventilation so that the room doesn't overheat. And one of the other ones, the major one which we discussed earlier, obviously, is connecting onto the roof terrace. So in this option, we've shown how the roof terrace would be at the level of this building, so you'd come up the stairs and out, but it equally could be lower, which Scott will talk you through on the next option. This is your main staff floor. Not a huge amount of changes proposed here, where there's discussions we obviously need to look at how we're investigating how much staff space you need. Obviously, working patterns have changed since COVID. It's a huge amount of hybrid working. So you really don't need as many desks as you've currently got. So that might allow more space to be used out. And then that's an income stream that could be added to the RSE. So the main change here, we've just improved the staff room. It's currently in the what's called the moon room, which is the room with the cupola. So we've increased the size of the staff room, and then that means the cupola room could possibly become a really nice meeting room, top lit. And then above where we were proposing the new lift, a new link into the office to the side. So again, just linking the two buildings much better rather than having to go through staircases and the like.
Sorry, this office accommodation, it's above here, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've never been allowed in there. So. I've still got short trousers.
So if you look at the office footprint in both buildings, almost everybody works in this building, one floor up, and almost all the rooms in the other building at this level are essentially meeting rooms that aren't used very much.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty well, I mean, they're a huge asset that's completely underused.
Agreed.
Well, sorry, which are the meeting rooms that are underused? Because
The ones that you've never been allowed in. The ones you've never been allowed in.
These ones around here and some.
And how big are, well, you've got is that number one I'm looking at there?
Yes.
My eyesight's very poor.
Top right. Yeah.
So what's number one then?
That's the main open plan office for RSE staff.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that would presumably be a useful meeting room. The very small rooms offer sort of intimate type meetings, with 2 or 3 people. Those are very difficult to market. They could be used by, fellows, but beyond that.
But I think, Jim's hit the nail on the head, that there's an awful lot of space here that could generate income for us. How do we go about doing that? In fact, we are speaking to somebody who would be interested in taking some of those rooms on the second floor of the George Street building just now. Yeah. But part of the sort of the brief is, and this is the next phase of this work is, actually how many desks do we need to have? How many breakout rooms for staff meetings do we need to have? How many meetings do we need to have for fellows to have? And then actually what other income, if we were to keep both buildings, how would you best take the layout to maximise the long-term rental potential of all the other buildings, So, some of them will be sort of venue hire for an afternoon or an evening, but there are some cases where you could actually get long-term tenants who would say, we'd love to be part of a prestigious association with the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And then we're thinking, that's great, that's covering part of our overheads. So I think, Jim, good point, and we're trying to, that's certainly one of the key things being worked on.
What I don't see, and you may well think it's impossible, is whether there are any physical alterations to the George Street building that would make those a more sellable prospect.
We'll present one of the next option.
Right, so good.
The physical change you're making at the moment is there's a lot of circulation in proportion to the number of rooms, partly because it was actually meant to be a museum on that floor, the Society of Antiquaries, which is why there's a large top-lit circulation space. So there's curiosities like that were perfect for when it wanted to be that, but not perfect when you're wanting to make greater use of the space. So just going up to the very top floor, which I'm almost certain most of you have never been to, not Laura, she's been there many a time. This is mostly rented out to a third party. There's the room underneath the dome, which is currently the library, which has great potential to be something and is, not at its top potential now. And there's a couple of little meeting rooms, the Tweed and the Clyde. So we're just suggesting that the library could be repurposed for fellows' use. It could be a better meeting space. I think just the fact it's the room under the dome, and everyone knows the dome in Edinburgh so well, it would just feels right that more should be made of it, and just a general upgrade of those offices. And if you upgraded them, you can also get more money annually for them.
The pink area there, that's all office, is that rented out? Or?
Rented out, yeah, to a third party.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, thanks,
Say
Christopher.
that I used to be the curator in 2017, and I have a particular interest in the library under the dome. So I'll come back to that later on.
We'd like to know more about it because, yeah, curiosity. So I'll hand over to Scott, who will take you through a more difficult option of if we sell the white building, you sell the white building and retain the George Street building.
Yes.
If that was the case, the loss of space from the sale of the white building would be 2,330 square metres. Some of the issues that we'll cover here will already have been covered in the previous options, but I'll try to touch on those specific to the sale of one or other of the buildings. So, basement level, there is the issue that at the moment the buildings rely on a combined fire escape arrangement, so there will be particular consideration to be done there as to where door openings can be blocked off and where means of escape must be maintained. The other main issue with the sale of the white building is that all of the plant equipment is located within the George Street building, so there will have to be consideration of recommissioning the redundant plant room at number 2 within the white building. Looking at the ground floor, again, separation issue between the buildings, and as you know, there's an escape route, particularly from areas like the James Clerk Maxwell room. We do need to rely on a secondary means of escape, so we need to give due consideration to that. And the other issue we've identified with the white building is that at the moment there's no back of house access for servicing, refuse collection, etc. So that is an issue that we need to consider as well, and how that's serviced if the George Street buildings are retained only.
Can I just ask, the white building is it Lakeland?
Yes.
Are they a long-term?
I think the lease is 27.
Right.
2027.
Are they likely to carry on?
Well, they're currently up for sale. I think it just happened a couple of days ago. It was announced, so we don't know. We don't know. So what we're doing is we're thinking, that if we were to keep owning that building, one possibility is a long-term retail client like that. Another possibility might be a different use of it altogether. So we just don't know the answer to that at all.
So looking at ground floor, we're recognising that there is a loss of significant office space from the loss of the white building. So this plan explores how that might be accommodated within the James Clerk Maxwell room and this gallery arrangement, which Liz described at the rear.
But this bit is this bit.
And moving down to the basement level, we've got the light-filled gallery at the rear. We're also identifying here that there might be an option to explore with meeting space, informal meeting space or office space at a lower level in the McRobert room. We think there is scope there to open up that room to the circulation space and create a more informal meeting space. Moving to the first floor, again, the issue of the separation of the buildings, the existing link would have to be blocked up. We are noting that there will be a loss of toilet provision and that will have to be accommodated in some way. And obviously the Kelvin room where we're meeting today is a well-used meeting space and there's no spatial equivalent within the George Street building.
Could I just go back a second? I think that if you're going to sell the white building, so to speak, dispose of it, then in terms of marketing this as a conference venue, you make it far less attractive, because when we've held conferences, we've done the catering in the Welcome Room West, I think it is, and which is L-shaped, and we've also had a small exhibition, and we've then gone down to the Welcome East. So we've had Welcome East and West as a continuous space, albeit there's a staircase in the middle. But it's been a very useful space. If you were to remove the white building, then I think that that what's left is of very little value to people.
That will be music to many people's ears, but I think the building working group remit from council was that we were to look at both options and sort of, keep, work hard so that that whichever you come up with, whatever is the recommendation coming out of it is clearly the best for the society, you see. So I think there's an awful lot of people who would strongly support what you say there, that actually the flexibility of having both buildings renovated, is well worth the effort of the fundraising to achieve it, and it equips it, builds us for the future in a way that having just one of the buildings wouldn't do.
Oh.
But rather than jumping to that conclusion too quickly, what we were asked to sort of, look at, and that's the remit we've given to the architect, that sort of have a go at making one building work and see if it can be done. But there are undoubtedly downsides in terms of the flexibility of the space if you've got a lot less of it. And there's also downsides in terms of the income generation potential if you've got a lot less of it.
Yeah.
So.
And then that can be tested with a business plan.
It can, yes,
Well,
that's so, but.
Once you get a decision and see, well, do any conferences need a space this size? And that can be tested to see
Yes,
if
yes.
it would be worth going forward.
It's a good
And there
point.
are upsides of selling as well, the principal one of which is a big dod of money, which we don't have. Right? We have no capital that would refurbish these buildings. So if we want to keep them, we'd have to raise a very large sum. If we sell one, conceivably, we could use it to do up the other.
Right, and again, so that's why we need to get, what can we afford? I think without preaching, it's Thomson Gray we're relying on them to give us a flavour of how much things would cost. But I think one of the key points that Scott's been bringing out is that, it wouldn't be a clean sale of either building because of the fire escape issue, because of the access to the back and this sort of thing. So, whichever one you keep, it's going to, if you were to sell one, there's disadvantages with selling either ones of those. But there's a big disadvantage in not selling them, and that is where to get the money from. And but actually, I suspect whatever we do, we will need to have a fundraising effort. We've got several £1 million in the buildings fund, but that's not going to look at some of the thoughts that we've got here. So there's going to be major fundraising going on. Yeah.
Okay, I shouldn't keep my mouth shut really, but the building isn't that bad, to be honest. There are bits of it which are a bit grotty, and bits of it perhaps that are underused, but it's an impressive building. We get delegates coming from 20 countries. They don't like the RSC, by the way, on the podium. They like the Royal Society of Edinburgh. A number of people who've said that to me.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that the Americans and many people are really desperate to have the word royal there, and then sort of denigrating it and modernising it to RSC. That they don't like that.
Okay, but well, that's probably. That's
issue.
That's a separate issue, but we'll take that as helpful feedback. We'll take that back to our comms people and branding and things like that. But sorry, but I hope that, Jim, we're interested in hearing people's thoughts because we need the support of the fellowship when it comes. I hope we've sort of shown that we've got those issues on hand. Sorry, on you go, Liz.
I'll look at the first floor then. So utilising this idea of the flat roof of the gallery as a roof terrace space with a new glazed roof light illuminating the space below. This is exploring the possibility of opening up one or two of the windows from the welcome room east, which we have, I think, tested with our heritage consultants and think there is possibility to do that. So there is scope to access that from there in this option. And then the removal of the stair, the link stair, to the white building allows us to incorporate a new accessible WC at this level to provide for the event space. Moving up then to the second floor, I think particular issues there is the CEO's office would need to be relocated, which is obviously in the corner of the white building at the moment. Looking at this loss of the staff room, so a new staff welfare space would need to be located in George Street, and the administration offices would be relocated as well. So opportunities to do that then, staff room we have indicated at number 1 there, and then provided a suite of spaces towards the front of the building, which we anticipate could be used for fellow spaces in the library. And you'll notice that we've also added a new stair, which provides access to a new level. So just coming back to that idea of physical alteration at the rear of the George Street building, we're anticipating that there's good opportunity there to create a new dormer extension with an open plan large office space to accommodate some of that displaced from the white building, and a new meeting room on that level as well, and extending the existing lift up to service floor as well.
So you're creating some new floor area by doing that?
Correct, yeah,
Understood that.
that's in the location of the existing plant room.
And so if you do the arithmetic, if you just go for that building, do you have enough floor space for the existing floor space of staff?
We think we do. There's a calculation to be done with hybrid working, and you've recently reviewed days in the office, days out. So we think we've got the numbers. We can do that on your current staffing levels. If staff are happy to do flexible desks, not so hot desking, a bit of sharing, and if people are happy to be moved around the building, so there could be some sort of, rather at the moment they're in 3 main offices, one being quite large. This would be breaking people up a bit, but we think we've got the desk space that it would work with this attic extension.
Okay, so if I could just translate that back, because we need to see this in terms of what we get. If we take this option, we've probably got enough room for our business needs in terms of the administration of the place. We've got a much smaller, but still some conference facility, and we have some capacity to do the kind of things that we currently do. What we don't get is the great big conferences, because you haven't got the welcome space. But you've still got the lecture theatre, you've still got the Scott room, you've still got at least one room in the basement that's usable for that, if I understood it. And you've got a different, the gallery, let's call it the gallery, is that potentially a nicer space than it currently is. So we could still do our business. We just wouldn't get so much.
And when it comes back to council, we'll have put that, because what we don't have just now is sort of Sarah and her team are charged with coming back with, what do you need going forward? We then need to take the stats for the number of meeting rooms that we're using and this sort of thing. And so that will all come back to council with, here's what having one building would look like. Here's what you would have enough room for, and here's what you wouldn't have the room for. And here, so that will all come back. Yeah.
So just to finish that bit of detail, at least as much work is needed on one building as would be needed on that building if we kept 2. Probably rather more by the sound of it.
Yes, I mean, I suppose the option 1 we've shown all building, like you could do that's all the opportunities, yes, sort of the golden ticket one. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do all of those things. That was more to show potential without the constraints of losing a building.
Okay.
I think for each of the options as well, there's also the potential to phase it. So, it doesn't mean that, day 1, whichever option you choose, everything's closed and you refurb the entire building and you go back. So again, depending on funding and also the priorities, then that can be adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomson Gray are going to do the costing in a element by element basis. So it's lots of mini projects that will be costed. So that will allow you to sort of almost do a recipe of when you work out, so that these options aren't set in stone. It might be a bit of one and a bit of the other to come up with the ultimate one that suits once the business case and everything is assessed.
It's helpful, thank you.
And a 3D image of how that might look. So that's looking at the rear of the George Street building with this idea of the new dormer extension and the stair arriving there, planned space. There's flexibility there as well. We've shown it as an office, but it's a large new extension which could equally make a reception space or be suited to many uses.
Hello's room.
Again, can I just comment on that? If you do create something, it looks very nice, but this is not space that you're going to market for weddings, for conferences or anything, is it really?
Well, I think we haven't got to that stage yet. I mean, there's plenty of other spaces that could be rented out and this sort of thing for weddings and what have you. I suppose what we're trying to see here is what's the maximum you could do if you kept the smaller of the two buildings. You know, what we haven't allowed for is, what would the hassle be for the people in the white building getting access through to the bins from this building and things like that? That hasn't, I don't think you've picked that one up yet. And that's not a criticism, it's just these are things being worked out. So, I mean, what you can see there is there's a lot of potential in just that one building, you know, and it may be enough, but it would reduce, but it may not be enough, and there'll be downsides as well as upsides. And that's why we need to keep developing, bringing, you know, seeing what the numbers are and the likely costs and things, you know. So we're not trying to say that, I mean, I think it's quite interesting, you know, even if we didn't need the space because we were keeping both buildings, would it still be worth building the extra space? Would the business case stack up? And these are things that we need to explore.
What about, again, I'm throwing balls in the air. Everybody's looking for bedroom space, and that sells at high prices.
Yeah, that has been discussed. I think we haven't, I mean, I think that's probably a level of granularity further down the line. You know, at the moment, we're still trying to make sure, are there enough desk
I mean, we're paying an arm
capacity?
and a leg for in Lamont, next door but one, when we stay here for the conference.
Yeah.
Very expensive.
Yeah, I suspect actually having bedrooms would also be very expensive too, with all the overheads and things. But I mean, it's things that it's an idea that has been suggested and is on the list of things to explore. I'm conscious we've only got like 9 minutes left, so you want to tell us about what would happen if we kept the white building?
Option 3, okay,
Yes.
we would be losing just over 1,600 square metres of the George Street building. Issues on the white building is obviously new plant equipment to service it. There's no commercial kitchen, so a service hoist and kitchen would need to be added to the white building. We've touched on the need to retain perhaps the gallery with the sale of the white building, so that goes as one in order to service it from the back lane and provide that back of house arrangement.
Creaky.
Oops, sorry.
Ground floor then, really dealing with the fire escape issues again, and the upper gallery. The lecture theatre we'd be dispensing off, so there would need to be a new lecture space incorporated into the white building. Looking at some opportunities then, ground floor is quite an easy one. It's a blank canvas, you've got a big open plan floor plate there. We're identifying a possibility to enter the white building from the George Street side there at number 1, looking at incorporating a small step lift to navigate the slight level change, and then entering into the middle of the ground floor space. Number 2 indicates a new intervention. The image on the right is St Paul's Cathedral, so quite a bit grander than this building, but I think that illustrates a new intervention which can be built almost like a piece of furniture, which would serve as a arrival and orientation point to incorporate a reception desk, even meeting space, and provide a legibility to the ground floor space, which might also incorporate main hall, cafe use. We're showing a bar at the top right, and also looking at creating a new stair to the basement, slightly offset from the centre at number 3. Then basement, this would be an ideal opportunity for a lecture theatre, possibly not of the size and scale of what you have at the moment in George Street building, but there is scope there to create something as indicated on the plan there, new kitchen space and plant space, and then a significant amount of WCs to support events. First floor, key issues, obviously in separation of the two buildings, looking at the Welcome Room West, addressing issues that have been reported during events in the past, such as road noise from passing traffic, and also the loss of the Scott Room as well would need to be addressed. Opportunities then, the pink areas down to the bottom of the drawing suggests a fellows suite of spaces, which would work quite well with those rooms. And the Welcome Room West retained for event use, with the potential for that to become a lecture or seminar space. Moving up to the second floor, a lot more opportunity there, I think, because we're dealing with open plan office space. There's a lot of options there for development of that. and likewise on the second floor as well. Big open plan area, lots of scope for office space, storage space, etc. Key issues here, obviously the plant room is provided at this level in George Street building, which is dispensed off. And opportunities, because the cupola over the moon room in this building was a later addition, we think it's possible to extend over that in this option if there was a need to add more office space or meeting space and extend into the roof. Okay, so that was a very quick run through, particularly with option 3, but hopefully that gives a flavour of some of the ideas we've been looking at. And as we said a few times, and David's also mentioned, at the end of the day, the preferred option is likely to be neither of these, but a combination of any of the sub-options. So hopefully that explains where we've got to, and we're really keen to obtain your feedback.
So on the retain the white building option, again, just to translate a bit what I'm hearing, there's more room, so it is more capable of doing the things we currently do. We lose the lecture theatre, we can make use of the basement and have a small lecture theatre. We retain the larger of the welcome rooms, so we've still got a function capacity, probably more than we've got in retaining the smaller building, and there's certainly enough room for all the staff. What there isn't is any really long-term letting out space as it is today, so that's the price we would pay. Okay. What struck me it is just how much floor space there is in this building currently occupied by Lakeland. And the other thing that strikes one about both of these buildings is the number of blooming staircases. You seem to want to be adding some, actually, which worried me a bit. But is there any scope for rationalising the number of treads in the building? Can we use some of that space?
All depends on the preferred option at the end of the day, I think. It's obviously a result of the way the buildings have developed independently and then being co-joined. We have to obviously maintain adequate escape routes, but I think there is resolution that can be done, but it all depends, I suppose, on.
Okay. How constrained are we by listed building? On this?
Yeah.
Some grand stuff here, can we just knock it down?
We are working with our in-house heritage consultants, and they're helping us to identify the areas of the building that have less opportunity for change and which shouldn't be altered.
Right, so that's not the same as listed building consent. Is our inside listed or not?
Everything is listed, everything's included within the listing, so external and internal.
It's all category A as well, so that's the, it doesn't mean, and some time ago, the RSE appointed Simpson and Brown back in 2004, I think, to do a conservation plan, and that sort of, it does the history and sets out significance. And in that, it sets out policies for change. And it does say in areas of the building there's potential for radical alteration. So it's not a precious gem that can't be altered, that it can be altered. It's just got to be done sensitively and appropriately in a way that convinces the authorities that the category listed building won't be impacted too much.
Can I make a comment? It goes
Yes.
back to my earlier point, and I'm going to make a couple of remarks which have a sort of curatorial perspective. We should remember that the RSE is a society of 240 years old, and we do have a heritage to think about. So it's not been mentioned this evening, but we have a remarkable art collection. And when we were talking about building development a few years ago, I strongly made the point that in any redevelopment of the George Street property, we must take very seriously the question of how we display our art collection. And related to that, we also have archives and we also have library material. We don't have a lot of library material, but what we have is very important. And I used to think that the Dome Library was a wonderful place. But unfortunately, when I was curator, the curator had no budget, so we couldn't do anything very much to restore it to its proper state. So can I just raise the point that when we think about the tone of the building, the general feeling of the building, and I come back to Mike Ford's point, we have people from all over the world, and they expect to see a significant old scientific society. And we mustn't modernize it excessively to the detriment of our art collection, our library, and our archival material. I just put that on the table.
And I think, thanks, Christopher. I mean, I think we accept that. I mean, I think one of the first words on the slide that you probably couldn't see was that we want this to be a prestigious building, and it's got to do all of that. I agree with that.
Yes.
I think the
And
only
that has
issue
to
I
be-
would say is we're not just a scientific society. We're a, you know, we're a sort of cross-disciplinary society. That's one of our strengths. I know you know that, but it's just for anybody
I'm
who
sorry
took-
if I said that. I don't think I said that, but
well, maybe I misheard that, but
nobody
yeah,
more conscious than I am of the
Yeah,
quality of our art collection, for example, which we really need to treasure.
No, I agreed with that. Agreed with that. And you'll be glad to know that in the budget that we'll be bringing to council next year, there is money for restoration of paintings and keeping the collection in good condition. So we're being good stewards, Christopher.
Splendid.
Good. Are there any other comments from people online? I realise we're probably running up to time, but you've been very patient. Nope. I thought somebody was going to, no, that's fine. So last call, I think people in the room have probably had comment, but Mike, if you want to say anything more, the floor is yours, Jim, and Ian at the back. Any comments, closing comments?
I think I think if you sell one half or the other half, the society loses some of its international credibility. You know, it's like downsizing from a very nice house to an apartment. That's the reality, isn't it? You know, going to a modern apartment. So I really feel that this is quite an impressive building. I've held 3 conferences here, and we've had people from, I don't know, 20 odd countries coming, and they come back again. And we have the global head of bridges for Atkins Realis. 650 bridge engineers report to him. I'm a civil engineer. So, and he comes to the conference, and he goes to conferences around the world. And when I meet him, he said, "Oh, that wonderful conference, that wonderful venue, the RSE. Now, you sell off one half of it and repaint it, he won't come."
Sure. Yeah, I have a personal, everybody's got personal preferences. If I told you my personal preference, and you'd think, well, he's not taking all the options seriously then, is he? You know, in the buildings work group, we're trying to take all the options seriously. To me, there's great flexibility in having a larger building with, you know, if we can afford it, it would be a great place to be, put it like that.
Sadly, the income from 3 conferences doesn't cover the cost of 2 buildings.
But still, I mean, this is going to be debated very considerably at council, and I think I think we understand the issue.
Is there another option here that, you know, working the university in engineering, my former head of school is over there.
There you go.
Peter Grant is keeping very quiet for a few minutes, which is good. But is there an opportunity for business development here? You know, that maybe the buildings, the society, the history, the kind of things that Chris Hall is talking about, could be marketed better. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all we're trying to do here is to decide, is the future the 2 buildings that we've got and the potential from that, and a big fundraising exercise and massive potential, or is the future something more modest and easier? I'll come to you in a sec, and more modest and perhaps easier to achieve. That's for now. All the other things about how you market, how you maximize things, those are all on the table. There's a lot of good things done by the RSE already to make, you know, good use of our resources, and particularly to make good use of the insights of the fellows and all that we can give to our country. So huge amount of good things being done. So, you know, all the things, they naturally follow. So if we end up renovating both buildings and doing that, then we've got to think how to maximize income from different bits, but how to maximize the potential for, you know, fellows engagement and public engagement and spreading the word and all this type of thing. So that's definitely on the cards.
But we don't actually
Down the
have,
line.
we don't actually have to renovate both buildings. I know that you could say that this could do with a lick of paint here and a lick of paint there. And I remember one of the previous presidents, referred to presidents now, and she was saying that maybe we need to refurbish the place a little bit to encourage weddings. I know weddings are seen as a very profitable thing. But I'm not into the market, you know. I come in here, I do what I want to do, and I go away.
I mean, there will need to be commercial business cases. Oh, I think we're about, Peter, we'll come to you in a second. I mean, I am conscious we're now running over, but Ian Wall, another fellow, you wanted to make a comment.
And just on the, keep the small one, keep the bigger one, keep both. The issue with buildings is always the same, whether they're small or big. You have to maintain them, manage them, and you have to generate the most income out of them. So that's a given. It seems to me they don't make buildings anymore, not George Street, and we should hold on to both, because with both you have more flexibility and more potential. And if you refurbish them, then you can put more commercial accommodation in, but you can pull back on that in 5, 10, 15 years' time, you know, as the society grows or changes, or even it gets smaller. If you've done the refurbishment in the right way, what you have is a decent commercial asset. The core, you know, the prestige, the foyer, things like that, all right, that's not too commercial, but hell, we're an academy, you know, we're not the Royal Bank of Scotland, and look, we're driving, you know, profit led you, you know? So, it seems to me a slam dunk. It's silly to dispense of a massive asset. And then I say to myself, well, if we did, what would we do with the money? We've got tons of capital. I mean, we just don't, we don't need money, finance capital. We do need assets that we can use to build the society with.
And thank you. I completely, Ian and I have talked about.
You're just the treasurer. I'm a fellow.
I know. Okay, yeah. Right. Peter, I think you might be getting the last word here.
I think the key thing is that we've got to make sure that the Royal Society of Edinburgh is financially secure for the future, and we have to do an analysis of how much space we need for the office staff, and how successful we can be about renting the rest of the space for conferences and for meetings. And we've got to just pick the right. We've got to pick the right balance of that, and that's the way to move forward. Because it's going to be also, we have to identify, it's going to be very expensive to make the roof work properly and not having leaks in many of the rooms, and that's going to take a lot of money in addition to reconfiguring the space within the building. Thank you.
No, that's really helpful. I agree with that too. Okay, good. Shall we bring this session to a close? I thought it was optimistic to try and get this in an hour. Sorry, we've run on. Thank you to Liz and to Scott, and of course we haven't heard much from Ian, but we hear from Ian at the Buildings Working Group. You'll be glad to know as well. So I hope you've been encouraged by what you've seen. I realise there are lots of issues and things, and we look forward. We've got some council members on the call, which has been helpful, and this deck has been shared with council, and it's a lot of just to prepare the way for the first of what will be many decisions, I think. But I think it's John is keen that before he passes the baton on, that at least we've decided, what's the broad shape of our aspirations with the building. We're very fortunate to have, as Ian says, to have 2 buildings in George Street. It's a great position to be in. How can we use that to be a good ancestor to those who come after us? So thank you very much for listening. And any comments? Treasurer at RSE, I think I haven't got access to that email yet, but I will have soon. So if you email me on that, I look forward to hearing what you think. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Bye for now. It's closed.
How do I get hold of the